Welcome to the Sakimori Research Lab of Universal Spirit. Thank you very much for visiting. In this issue, I would like to examine the relationship between the heavenly rock door closing and heavenly rock door opening of Shinto in the Oomoto Shinto religion and the second coming of Christ. However, it is very difficult to explain Onisaburo Deguchi's spiritualistic interpretation of Japanese mythology to those who are not familiar with Japanese mythology such as Kojiki and Nihon Shoki. For this reason, I will largely omit the interpretation of Japanese mythology in God's program. I will only examine the very similar similarities between Shintoism and Christianity. First, we will examine why synchronicity works between Japanese mythology and the Bible. Onisaburo Deguchi speaks of Jehovah, the creator god, as the same god as Amenemina-Kanusi-no-Kami in the Japanese mythological classic Kojiki and Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto in Oomoto, as follows. What kind of god does the name Jehovah denote? It is difficult for some people to understand, and some may simply think it is a foreign deity and dismiss it as irrelevant. However, Jehovah is a Hebrew word that means the main body of the universe, the fundamental God who was, is, and will be in the future. If we can interpret it in this way, we can see that it actually refers to the deity that the Japanese people have called Amenemina-Kanusi since time immemorial. In other words, it is the Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto, which is extremely important to us. He also made a startling statement about the deities of Japanese shrines. The gods worshipped at Japanese shrines are all heroes of the past, gods of the dead and dead Buddhas, and not a single shrine worships the Christian God, the living God of immortality. There is not a single god that stands for the current mission, because they forbid it, saying it is paganism. This term also clearly implies that the Christian God is Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto, the living God. And in volume 47 of Tales of the Spiritual World, Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto, the creator god of the material world, becomes the presiding deity of the earth through approximately the following activities. First, he appears as Takamimusuhi-no-Ukami, the originator of spirits, then he acts as Izanagi-no-Ukami, the creator of heaven and earth, and then as Hai-no-Ukami, the sun god. In this sense, all the deities that appear in Japanese mythology in the process of creating the material world are considered to be alter egos or incarnations of the root deity. The names of the deities can then be considered to indicate the scope and function of their creative roles. Furthermore, in the Tales of the Spiritual World, Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto appoints the presiding deity of the sun and moon. And Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto himself acts as the presiding deity of the divine spiritual world of earth. On these developments, Onisaburo Deguchi had the following to say. Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto is the source of Amaterasu-Oomikami, but it is worked downwards. Amaterasu-Oomikami is the alter ego of Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto. In other words, Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto was active as a sun god before becoming the presiding deity of the earth's divine spirit world, and entrusted his alter ego, Amaterasu-Oomikami, with the presiding deity of the sun. In Japanese mythology, the sun god Amaterasu-Oomikami closes the door of the rock, causing the world to become dark. The gods then hold a festival, and Amaterasu-Oomikami emerges from the Oomoto rock door to once again illuminate the world. This is the heavenly rock door opening of the sun god Amaterasu-Oomikami in Japanese mythology. Onisaburo states that Jehovah is Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto. And Christ and Amaterasu-Oomikami are both sun god spirits. Therefore, the resurrection of the sun god in the biblical resurrection is thought to be represented in Japanese mythology as Amaterasu-Oomikami's heavenly rock door opening. This is why there is a synchronicity between the two. This recognition should also be of crucial importance in anthroposophical Christology. Steiner, on the other hand, states that the beings who acted to give the ego body to man, who was still in the early soul state, were the 7 Elohim, the solar spirits. First, only one of those 7 Elohim goes to the moon on its own to infuse wisdom into the human soul. Then, the light of the 6 Elohim of the sun is reflected as moonlight by 1 Elohim, so that the human soul can understand the wisdom. Thus, the human soul is given wisdom through the moonlight, and through this wisdom the readiness to accept the power of love, which is later the heat of sunlight, is nurtured in the human soul. Subsequently, through this joint work, the 7 Elohim rise as the unity of one group of Elohim. Steiner states that one Elohim who temporarily reflected sunlight onto the moon during the development of the human ego is Yahweh. The Elohim in their later state of 7-pillar unity are also collectively referred to as the Yahweh Elohim. This is how the 7-pillar Elohim came to be called Yahweh or Jehovah in the Old Testament. And later, through the moonlight wisdom of the Old Testament, the being who, as the unity of the 7 pillars of Elohim, made the human individual self understand love is called Christ and is described in the New Testament. Furthermore, in a situation where Yahweh was later deposed by Orman's forces, Islam is said to have revived the religion of Yahweh of the Old Testament. On the other hand, Onisaburo Deguchi also notes that in the book of Genesis, the word Elohim is used to refer to God, rather than simply Jehovah. Elohim means gods, and this plurality of words is necessary because the root is one God, but manifests itself in many different ways. This is a complicated story and will not be covered here, but not only this, but Steiner's and Onisaburo Deguchi's perceptions of the Elohim coincide in detail, leading to an important common understanding of the workings of the gods in the Old Testament and the Kojiki. Also, with the awakening of man to ego consciousness in the material world, man became strongly influenced by the evil spirit Ahriman. Anthroposophy states that this led to Yahweh's abdication, which is also consistent with how Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto was secluded in Ushitora northeast. Furthermore, this is portrayed by the ancient Egyptian initiates as a myth that Osiris was killed by the evil god Set and became Osiris, the trial god of the underworld. Steiner tells us that those who entered the spirit world through mystical entry in the late Egyptian period saw the gods gradually dying. Those who entered the spirit world through initiations in the late Egyptian period felt that the gods were saying goodbye to the spirit world and moving on to another world. It is significant and noteworthy that the late Egyptian period of mystic entry is not about rapture and bliss when entering the spirit world, but about engaging with the gradual death of the gods that once existed as cosmic language and cosmic music. From this mood gradually took shape the myth that Osiris had been robbed of Isis and taken away to Asia, and that Isis was therefore grieving. It is also estimated that Osiris' retreat into the underworld and Yahweh's abdication probably took place around 1000 BC, i.e. about 3000 years ago. This is consistent with what Ushitora no Kanjin of Oomoto pointed out, that it has been trapped in Japan for 3050 years. And in Anthroposophy, this Osiris is considered to be the same god as Christ. Onisaburo Deguchi, on the other hand, explained that the Semites, one of the 3 great peoples of prehistoric times, belonged to the Japanese, Koreans, Manchu, Mongols, Caucasians, and Jews. He also explained that the stream of Israel is the stream of the Japanese Ise, as interpreted by Kotodama Soul of Language. In other words, the 10 tribes of Jews from Israel went to Asia with Judaism, the wisdom of the moon. In the process, they are thought to have brought Buddhism, which was preached by the Buddha, and Christianity, which spoke of the love of the sun, to Japan. It is thought that in this process, Judaism, Buddhism and Christianity merged with the Shinto religion of Ise in Japan. This is why the second coming of Christ was reenacted in Japan. I shall now briefly examine the Christ being of Anthroposophy with the help of a diagram. I will begin with the spiritual meaning of the Trinity in Steiner's Anthroposophy. Steiner says of the Trinity, Christianity is not 3 gods, but 3 divine forms. That is no longer perceived by people today. People do not perceive today that from the beginning Christianity had not 3 gods, but 3 divine forms, the Father, the Son, and the so-called Holy Spirit. Furthermore, Steiner also states, The original Christianity spoke not of three gods, but of three forms in which one God discloses himself. From Steiner's words, this means that one aspect of God the Father as the Son Spirit is called the Son and the Christ. And of this solar divine spirit, he says the following. In the mysteries, the Christ presence was always known. The seven immortals of ancient India called Christ Vishvakarman. Zoroaster named the Christ presence Ahura Mazda. In Egypt, Christ's presence was called Osiris. The Jewish people called the Christ being Yahweh. And during the fourth cultural period, this being lived on earth for 3 years. He also said the following. The early Christian initiates of the mysteries said, Christ, known today as the fulfillment of the sacrament of Golgotha, descended from a much higher height to the sun. On that height, Zoroaster saw Christ. Then the power of Christ entered the rays of the sun, which were seen by the Egyptian initiates. Then the power of Christ lived in the circumference of the earth, which was seen by the Greek initiates. Now Christ must be seen as one who walks among people as a being united to the earth. Now he must be seen in the interior of the earth, seeing the secret of the earth, and Christ in his resurrected form. He knew that this secret will gradually be poured out in the evolution of humanity. In other words, it is understood that in Anthroposophy, Osiris, Jehovah and Zeus are spoken of as Christ. Next, Onisaburo Deguchi, in Tales of the Spiritual World, Volume 6, tells us that in the primordial beginning of the macrocosm, an invisible cosmic great original spirit appeared over a period of more than 1 billion years. The creator is called Amenemina-Kanusi-no-Kami in Japan, Amida Nyorai in Buddhism, God or Zeus in Christianity, Taiji in I Ching, and Tien Lord of Heaven or Heaven in China. Furthermore, the God who gave birth to spirit, power, and body and completed the universe is called Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto in Oomoto. This Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto then became the sun god, then the presiding deity of the spiritual world of the earth, and later was sectioned from Jerusalem to Japan by the evil gods. And Onisaburo Deguchi spoke of Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto, Jehovah and Zeus as the same god. Steiner spoke of Jehovah and Zeus as Christ. In other words, Onisaburo speaks of Christ as Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto, as Steiner spoke of Christ in Anthroposophy. Onisaburo also spoke of Christ, the sun god of Anthroposophy, as Amaterasu-Oomikami, an incarnation of Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto. And Christ, who in Anthroposophy descended to earth and became the king of karma, has been called Ushitora no Kanjin Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto in Oomoto. Furthermore, the resurrection of Christ in the Bible is spoken of in Japanese mythology as a heavenly rock door opening. And the second coming of Christ in the 20th century was spoken of by Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto as a second heavenly rock door opening. Onisaburo called Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto the second coming Messiah and spoke of Susanoo-no-mikoto Onisaburo as the reborn Messiah. Steiner spoke of this deity as the appearance of Christ in the etheric world, which on earth would be prepared by Maitreya Bodhisattva. Above, in Episode 23, we compared Christ in Anthroposophy and Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto in Oomoto and examined how the same God is spoken of by different names. In the next video, Episode 24, we will be a sequel to this one and will examine the relationship between Jehovah, the God of Judaism, and Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto. For a more detailed understanding, please see the trilogy Why Can't Maitreya Bodhisattva Be Identified Even After 100 Years Since Steiner's Death? In the second part, I consider the commonalities between Osiris and Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto. In the third part, I consider the Christ of Anthroposophy, Kunitokotachi-no-mikoto of Oomoto, and the fig fruit. Thank you for watching until the end. We appreciate your continued support.